Imagine waking up one morning to find out that everything you worked for, everything you've saved, has vanished into thin air. That your entire life savings, your retirement fund, the money you thought was safe, was all part of the biggest financial fraud in history. This is the story of Bernie Madoff, one of the most infamous conmen to ever walk Wall Street. But how did he do it? And how did he get away with it for decades? Stick around, because this story is more shocking than you can imagine. To understand how Bernie Madoff pulled off the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, we need to go back to where it all started. Because he didn't wake up one day and decide to become a fraudster. No, his journey began like that of many ambitious young men chasing the American dream. Born in 1938 in Queens, New York, Madoff wasn't raised in a wealthy family. His father was a plumber and stockbroker, and his mother briefly worked in finance. But they weren't high society. They weren't elites. Madoff, however, had one thing that set him apart: an obsession with success. He wanted to be someone. After graduating from Hofstra University with a degree in political science, he started his own investment firm in 1960. Just a small operation, ran out of a tiny office with only $5,000, money he has saved from working as a lifeguard. Think about that. From lifeguard to Wall Street mogul. At first, his firm was legitimate. He made money honestly. He was innovative, one of the first to see the potential in electronic trading. But here is the thing. Madoff wasn't just a businessman. He was a salesman, a master manipulator who knew exactly how to make people trust him. And in the world of finance, trust is everything. At first, Bernie Madoff wasn't running a Ponzi scheme. His investment firm was real. He was making money through legitimate trading. But as the years went by, the pressure to maintain high and consistent returns became overwhelming. He had built a reputation as a financial wizard, someone who could beat the market no matter what. And once that image was established, he had no choice but to keep it up by any means necessary. So how exactly did the scheme work? Let's break it down. Investors would hand over their money expecting Madoff to put it into the stock market. But instead of actually investing, he simply deposited their cash into a bank account. When someone wanted to withdraw their profits, he used money from newer investors to pay them. The numbers of their statements looked great, but in reality, their money wasn't growing, it was just being shuffled around. This kind of fraud isn't new. The Ponzi scheme is named after Charles Ponzi, a con artist from the 20s who promised investors huge returns by supposedly profiting from international postage stamps. But what made Madoff different was his ability to maintain the illusion for decades. He didn't promise outrageous, unbelievable profits, just steady, reasonable gains, and that's why so many people trusted him. To make the scam even more convincing, Madoff made sure that his clients believed they were part of an exclusive club. He didn't openly advertise his services. Instead, he let word of mouth do the work. Wealthy individuals, hedge funds, and even charities fought to invest with him, thinking they had discovered a golden ticket. And as long as new money kept coming in, the system stayed afloat. But every Ponzi scheme eventually hits a breaking point. At this point, you might be wondering, how did no one catch on? How could Madoff deceive some of the most experienced investors and financial regulators for so long? First, there was the illusion of legitimacy. Madoff wasn't some outsider or shady figure operating in the shadows. He was a former chairman of Nasdaq. He had spent decades building his reputation on Wall Street. He was seen as a pioneer in electronic trading, a man who had revolutionized the financial industry. When someone with that kind of history tells you your money is safe, it's hard to question them. The trust was his greatest weapon. Second, Madoff carefully controlled access to his fund. He didn't chase investors, he made them chase him. His firm operated like an exclusive club. You couldn't just walk in and invest your money. You had to be invited. And that exclusivity created a psychological trap. People believed that if they were lucky enough to be in, they must be making a smart decision. And when people feel special, they're far less likely to ask questions. Then, there were the consistent returns. Most Ponzi schemes collapsed quickly because they promised outrageous and unrealistic profits. But Madoff was smarter than that. He didn't promise to double your money overnight. Instead, he showed steady, predictable growth, usually around 10-12% per year. Ironically, it was that very stability that should have been a red flag. Real investments go up and down. No one, not even the best investors in the world, can guarantee consistent returns year after year. But because Madoff's numbers weren't too extreme, people didn't suspect fraud. And then there was the Securities and Exchange Commission, the government agency responsible for detecting fraud. Over the years, financial analysts raised red flags. One man, Harry Markopolos, spent nearly a decade warning the SEC that Madoff numbers didn't add up. He even ran the math and proved that Madoff's strategy was statistically impossible, but every time he reported it, the SEC ignored him. Why? Part of it was incompetence, part of it was arrogance, and part of it was simple human nature. People didn't want to believe that someone as respected as Madoff could be a fraud. It was easier to assume that he was just a financial genius playing by rules they didn't understand. By the time people started asking the right questions, it was too late. The damage was already done, and the house of cards was about to come crashing down. So what finally brought Madoff down? It wasn't some brilliant detective work or a deep investigation. It was simple math. The 2008 financial crisis hit, and investors panicked. They wanted their money back, and not just a little. $7 billion in withdrawal requests flooded in. For Madoff, this was the end of the road. He didn't have the cash to pay them because, of course, the money had never been invested in the first place. It was all gone. The scheme had finally collapsed under its own weight. Realizing that he couldn't keep up the illusion any longer, Madoff gathered his family and confessed everything to his sons. Stunned, they immediately reported him to the authorities, and on December 11, 2008, Bernie Madoff was arrested. His entire empire of deception had crumbled overnight. The numbers were staggering. He had stolen an estimated $65 billion, the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Thousands of people lost their life savings. Some investors were so devastated that they took their own lives, and in the end, many of them never saw their money again. In 2009, Bernie Madoff stood in court and admitted to everything. He pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies, including fraud, money laundering, and perjury. The judge handed down a sentence that made headlines: 150 years in prison, ensuring that Madoff would die behind bars. But the story didn't end there. The effect of his crime rippled through the financial world. His own family fell apart. His son Mark Madoff, unable to live with the shame, took his own life in 2010. His other son, Andrew, died of cancer in 2014, blaming the stress of the scandal for his illness. And Madoff himself, he spent the last years of his life in a federal prison, where he eventually died in 2021. Even today, the name Bernie Madoff is a symbol of greed, deception, and betrayal. His story is a warning, a reminder that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And no matter how powerful someone appears to be, the truth always comes out in the end. If you found this story shocking, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into financial scandals and scams. Let me know in the comments, what do you think was the biggest red flag in Madoff's scheme? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.